Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen. Oh. Passan, could you enable sharing screen for me, please?
Yes. Sorry. Just do that. Screen. Yeah, try again.
Fantastic. So, well, perfect. Yeah, that works. Fantastic. So, good morning or good afternoon to everyone. My name is Charit. I'm going to talk to you about memory. In particular, how we can support students to retain and retrieve knowledge. I grew up in Sri Lanka. Well, I grew up in the UK, then I did secondary school in Sri Lanka, and then I came back to the UK for university, and I've been teaching here ever since. So let's crack on. When thinking about memory, there are really two parts to it that we need to think about. The first is working memory, and this is really where thinking happens. This is where students calculate, this is where students read, this is where students problem solve. The second is their long-term memory. And this is where knowledge is stored, whether that's a phone number, whether it's a definition, an event, a theory, or an idea. So when students are in your classroom, they're really using their working memory. When they're paying attention, they're using their working memory. When, after they leave your classroom, hopefully that knowledge is transferred to their long-term memory. And then when they need to, sit an exam or apply their knowledge, they need to retrieve what's in their long-term memory and apply it in their working memory. There are three factors which really influence this transfer and the retention of knowledge in the long-term memory. The first is thinking hard. The research has shown that the harder students think and the harder students grapple with something to understand it, the more likely it is to be embedded in their long-term memory. Secondly, we have cognitive overload, which essentially means don't overload your students. Like all of us, students can only grasp and grapple with certain things or certain amount of things. We can't be overloaded. If you overload them, it'll essentially just shut down. Well, their working memory will get overloaded and nothing will be transferred to their long-term memory. So that's another thing you definitely want to avoid. And thirdly, we have retrieval practice. And personally, I find this the most interesting, and it's had a massive impact in my classroom and my school. And this is really what I want to focus on today. So what I have here is it could be a medium-term plan for us as teachers. We have January till May. And when we teach, it might look something like this. Obviously, this is very basic, but you have topic 1 in January, topic 2 in February, topic 3 in March, topic 4 in April, and then an exam at the end. And your teaching plan might look something like kind of similar to this. And if your students are anything like mine, when it comes to studying and revising, it will look like blank, blank for February, blank for March, and then they'll realize, oh, I've got an exam in May, and they'll cram everything in April. The former, the teaching style that we can see here, that's actually called blocked practice. And the studying example at the bottom is called massed practice. Now, both of these are contribute to learning, but both have been shown to be not as effective when it comes to retention of knowledge and being able to retrieve that knowledge in a student's final exam. So when we're thinking about memory and how students learn things in the long term, we also really need to think about how students forget. This is the forgetting curve. It was developed in the 19th century by Hermann Ebbinghaus. And ever since it's been developed and tested and essentially proven correct by lots of psychologists, educators, and neuroscientists as well. And what we can see here is that when students learn something at the beginning, they're at 100%. That's probably your lesson. They're at 100% retention. That retention very, very quickly drops off to 80, 60, 40, 20, and finally it reaches around 10%. But that happens in hours, days, weeks. It's quite sad. It's quite sad, especially when you think about how much time you put into your lessons, how you try to make them memorable, how you try to really support your students to understand something, and then it's almost natural, especially considering how many subjects they have to, how many subjects they have, and all the different things they learn, how that retention, how that memory of your lesson and what they learned really drops off very, very quickly. And that's quite annoying. Having said that, Hermann Ebbinghaus also developed a way to combat this forgetting curve, how we can reduce that impact. And that's called spaced retrieval practice. If you look at this graph, you can see that you have a similar drop-off. So when students initially learn something, they start to forget, like everyone else, like you, like me, like all of us. They start to forget. But after a certain point, they review what they learned. And after each, they review what they learned, and that happens several times over the course of a month, over the course of, however long. And after each review, it was found that students forget far more slowly. Also, the interval between each review, it's most effective if that interval is increased so that it's embedded in the students' long-term memory. Now, all of this is based on, like 2 centuries of research. And it's been proven to be effective by both educators and psychologists. And we can really use this in our lesson plans to improve retention. So if we were going to compare spaced practice to blocked and massed practice, it would look something like this. You teach topic 1 in January, come back to it fairly soon, have a bit of a gap, come back to it again. This time, maybe we will have a large gap, and then come back to it. And then we'll finally come back to it just before the exam. This is known as spaced practice, and this works great. You'll have 90% retention as opposed to 10% retention. However, I know what you're all thinking. What about the other 3 topics that I have to cover before a student's exam? And that's what I'm going to come to now. So this is what a normal medium-term plan might look like. This is what I taught from January until lockdown, until just before lockdown, say mid-March. And there were 9 weeks. You can see right at the top, I started with radioactivity, and I taught that for week 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And then I moved on to astronomy. I should mention this is a grade 10, a year 10 physics class. Afterwards, I moved on to astronomy. You can see I've got 2 columns for my 2 lessons with this class. And then I've also got a section afterwards for homework. Now, you can see that I've taught 2 topics this period, this term, P6, radioactivity, and P7, that's topic 6 and topic 7. P6, radioactivity, topic 7, P7, astronomy. I taught them this over the course of 1 term, but their end of term assessment, which I've highlighted at the bottom, is on 7 topics, not the 2 topics I taught this term. So this is pretty similar to the structure of an O-level or an A-level or GCSE. Now, everything I taught before, topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, topic 4, topic 5, if Ebbinghaus is to be believed, they would have forgotten 90% of what I taught them before during this period of time. So how can I adjust my lesson plan, my medium-term plan, to account for this and to prevent that forgetting? Basically, I went back to this graph here. I provided an initial learning moment or homework, and that was simply to create revision notes for students to go back over what they've learned before. And that was just one topic per week for homework. Next, I'm gonna go back to that. Because that might be a little difficult to digest. There was one topic a week for homework, and that was simply just to create revision notes, and I checked that in class. Next, I needed to review that after 1 day. Or at least the research showed that I should review that after 1 day. And that was done as a quiz in class. So you can see in the lesson 1 column, there's a quiz on that exact same topic. So I'm going from topic 1 at the top in blue. And then the next lesson, I have topic 1, again, a quiz on that. Then I need to review it again, but this time after a longer duration, after a longer interval. And that interval has been shown to be 10 days, roughly, give or take. Obviously in education, we're working in an imperfect kind of situation, but after 10 days-ish. So I set them homework the following week, and that's what we can see here. So you can see the blue at the top going from P1, revision notes, a quiz, the next lesson, and then another quiz the following week. And then I needed to review it for a third time. And that's review 3 at 30 days. So if you look for the light blue again, we're jumping from week 1 to week 2 to week 3, and then week 6. At this stage, retrieval is far, far stronger. If you try it, you'll definitely see it in your lessons. Retrieval is far, far stronger, and knowledge has certainly been retained in the long-term memory. And this has been done not just in my class, but across my school, and it's resulted in an improvement of 2 grades per class on average, just because students can simply remember what they've done previously. And finally, so I know this is a lot, but if you focus on the colors, you can kind of see I've followed the 1 day, 0 day, 1 day, 10 day, and 30-day pattern. And finally, if you were to compare this to, before I move on, it's also really important to note that I've used quizzes, not rereading of notes. There's a huge amount of research and literature which has shown that rereading notes just does not work. It doesn't result in retention. It doesn't result in understanding. The one thing that does is quizzing or testing yourself. That's why it's extremely important that students do past paper questions rather than just rewrite notes. So if we're going to compare what these 4 styles of learning might look like, it'll look something like this. You've got blocked practice at the top, where each topic is in its own block. You've got massed practice below, where each topic is kind of crammed right at the end, and that's certainly going to result in cognitive overload. You have spaced practice, which really works for one topic and shows how if you keep coming back to it, retention is far stronger. And then you have interleaved practice, which is what I was talking about before. And that shows how you can embed spaced practice within your current teaching. And this again follows the trend. You come back to it on day 0, day 1, day 10, day 30, and then monthly, really. I'll leave that there just for you to digest. And if you have any questions, please do ask. And again, each review is a quiz. It's not reading notes, it's not reading a book, it's a quiz, it's a test, because that's going to force the students to think hard and retrieve that information, retrieve that knowledge, rather than just reading something and nothing really going in. So to sum up the key points, do push your students to think hard, but at the same time, do not overload them. Interleaving topics and content will result in the best retention. And finally, quizzing is far more effective than reading or rereading notes that they've made. Thank you. That's it. There's a great review on the literature by Dunlowski. Feel free to take a look at that. It's a review of, I think, 800 papers over the last 2 centuries. And it really boils down into these 3 things. Thanks a lot.
Jared, thank you so much for that. If anyone has any questions, you could either write them here, I can ask them for you, or just give me a reaction and I'll unmute you so you can ask it yourself. I completely agree, Jared. I think we need to keep bringing back these topics that we discussed, because I've had sessions where in my lesson I thought, wow, that was a really good session and everyone's understood it, and they do. But then I ask questions from that topic again weeks later, and it is as if I've never mentioned that topic ever.
Absolutely.
So we need to bring this back. And I think quizzing, be it multiple choice, be it a exam practice, I think is an important way to bring these sessions back.
Absolutely.
Super. I don't think there are any questions, so we'll move on to Dr. Rowlands. I'll unmute you there.